what we're doing at Turion now is there's kind of two parts. There's really a fully integrated infrastructure, which consists of the hardware component, our droid satellites. We call our satellites droids. And then a software component, which is Starfire, the Starfire platform. So Starfire, you can use that to task our existing fleet. We have 2 satellites in orbit already, both operational. And basically right now what those satellites are doing is, call it, on the commercial side, we can help companies resolve anomalies. If they can't communicate with their satellite, we can image it when we fly by at, 35,000 miles an hour. And not just a dot in the frame of a picture, but like a resolved image. And that is interesting because now if you can't communicate with your satellite, is it because the antenna didn't deploy? Is it because your solar panels didn't deploy? Did you get hit by something else? That's something that we're doing right now. Or on the national security side, call it intelligence with discretion.
Hey everyone, welcome to Founders in Arms with me, Immad, co-founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj Suri, co-founder of Lima and Tribe. And today we're welcoming Ryan Westerdahl, founder and CEO of Turion Space. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Turion does?
So Turion designs, builds, operates satellites. We are building resilient space infrastructure and really broadly proliferating critical infrastructure in space, starting with critical infrastructure in space for space. So the mission focus area that I would say, is anything in this area we are focused on is space domain awareness, space to space activities for national security purposes, space sustainability, things like orbital debris, and building a business around this is our stepping stone to our longer term plans around asteroid mining one day. So at this point, we have actually refined the timeline for when we think that's going to occur. And it should be a fun journey over the next 10 to 15 years.
Asteroid mining's a new one. I invested in Ryan in 2021, so I just pulled up my notes. So every time I invest, I especially with Zoom, you make notes. So I just pulled up the notes, but nothing about asteroid mining in my notes. Is that was that always in the back of your mind, or is that
it was? When we were in YC, I remember one of the things they did was everyone in the batch had to do a 15-second, 30-second pitch, and your goal was to stand out. And I remember we're there's this asteroid, Psyche 16, that's worth, $400 quintillion or something in precious metals. And, but we kind of, we backed up a little bit from there just because we wanted to focus more on what are we building now? And at the time it was more focused on orbital debris removal. Orbital debris removal is a critical problem to solve, but even in the YC days, we have now, there are now multiple steps between now and actually doing those missions. Now we're actually not. We've been charging for it on what we call an uncooperative RSO resident space object capture demonstration mission, which effectively is a orbital debris removal demo. Uncooperative meaning that it's uncontrolled, and capture meaning you're not docking with it. You're actually capturing it with an unprepared surface. So we've been doing quite a bit of work with Space Force, NASA, as leading up to that. In fact, 3 different contracts are all kind of precursor contracts to that demo mission. So the demo mission we expect to do probably in the back half of 2027. 2027 to Q1 2028 is when it would launch. So really looking forward to that. But the reality is with orbital debris removal and why we kind of focused on that as a stepping stone to asteroid mining is it kind of, it gets you good at the fundamentals. You need to get good at remote sensing. You need to get good at moving things around in space. You need to get good at autonomous and complex satellite operations. Most importantly, too, is the stepping stone approach for something like asteroid mining to truly send back, a lot of, you have to refine ore in situ. So basically where these asteroids are, oftentimes these asteroids are, most of the time, they're pretty far away. There are about 15% of what are called near Earth asteroids take less energy, therefore propellant and propulsion to go to and from and back to Earth than the surface of the moon. But it's still it's a long process, and it's to do it at the right scale and refine that amount of material. It takes massive infrastructure. So it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time. And besides building the technical foundation with a mission like orbital debris removal, we need to build a financial foundation and build a company that's robust enough to actually afford to go and do something where you're not going to get your first billion return on investment, for potentially several years. With orbital debris removal, that's also the problem with that is that's not an existing market. We think NASA is likely to be the entity to first fund some of those missions. But what we've found is that, with the remote sensing capabilities you can build, the rendezvous capabilities you can build, and even the capture of an uncooperative space object, with those capabilities, there is significant interest in those capabilities from a national security perspective. And with the establishment of Space Force, 4 or 5 years ago, it's already more well funded than NASA. And in my opinion, it's actually relatively the average government entity is actually fairly well run because it's somewhat new in terms of their speed. We've actually I actually don't have can't say much about what they should do to speed things up because I think they're actually doing quite a bit.
These timelines are still kind of insane, Ryan, right? Like you started this in 2021. You're saying 27 is when you kind of do this test for the uncontrolled attachment thing. How do you keep motivated with such long timelines and is it all about kind of intermediate steps?
I mean, we should even back up, right? Sure, the official Turion journey began in 2021, but the real journey, at least for me, began, in 2002. I remember the exact moment because it was the day after Christmas, and I remember it was the same year SpaceX was founded, and I'm sitting there. I don't know if you guys remember. You probably do. The FM CD player combo devices. Those were the hot thing back in the day. Got that for Christmas the day before, so that's how I remember. And an NPR segment came on about the first planets discovered around other stars. And I'm like, life mission cemented, build the ships that go there. Reality check, we got to go around our solar system first. So Mars is the closest planet. It's less terrible compared to Venus. So who's talking about doing that? Some crazy guy who just sold PayPal. So interim life mission, get to SpaceX. And so pretty much from when I was 11, it was what do I do to get a job at SpaceX? So I explored a lot of options, eventually got to University of Washington, studied aerospace engineering there. That's where I met my co-founder, Tyler Pierce, actually in that program. I grew up, raised by a single mother with no money. So I didn't have any. I needed to get a job, an actual job. So I didn't really have the luxury to just go straight to grad school and study fusion. So yeah, my thinking from when I was 11 was ended up working out, and I got a job at SpaceX where I stayed the next about 9 years. And it was an awesome place. My boss there, Kevin Wu, shout out K Wu, solved some of it was awesome person, really learned a lot about leadership working for him. I just give him a shout out because he's the CTO of Relativity now. So fun kind of full circle there. And now we're talking about launching on some of their missions in the future. Basically, there's a lot of things that I did there, a lot of worked across a lot of different teams. Really, the simplest way to summarize, when things blew up, it was we were the guys you called to piece data together to figure out why it blew up, how to prevent it from happening again. So it was very cross-departmental. And it required learning at it required a fast rate of learning of new information just because, we had to go work with a bunch of other groups, understand exactly like how their system fit into whatever the issue was. And that's honestly the most valuable takeaway from SpaceX that I got, is understanding broadly, but also to a sufficient level of depth to make decisions. So many different types of technology.
So when you were 11 and you were like, hey, I need to like get into space, I need to get to planets and other solar systems. Did you think you'd start a company to try to achieve that objective, or you thought you'd work at SpaceX or some other?
So, I didn't really know when I was that young. I think the signs were there. Like, at first I was worried about paying even for college. Um, and I had an idea after taking some high school physics to build a wind turbine, put it on our roof, connected it to the electric bulb box on our house. And then, basically was like, all right, I'm going to expand this. This is like senior year in high school. I'm going to expand this and sell it to everyone in the neighborhood, go beyond. Turns out it's a terrible idea from an energy density perspective. Like, it needs to be higher up. If there are trees, you're just screwed. But that journey actually is what got me a scholarship to University of Washington. So, I knew I needed to get to SpaceX. I didn't know enough about starting companies and wasn't exposed to any of that kind of stuff growing up, outside of like, learning about some of the greats and just being like a pretty hardcore reader. Um, so by the time I got to SpaceX, I remember the first day I'm getting lunch, and my boss asked me, "So are you gonna, kind of a weird question from your boss on the first day, but I guess we were just tight like that. How long are you going to stay here 5 years and, vest your equity and bounce? Are you going to stay here for a few years? Are you a lifer?" I'm like, I'm either a lifer or I'm going to start something in 5 years. And I didn't know what at the time, but I thought it might be possible. So, one thing I haven't mentioned publicly, but I don't know. I don't think they'll be upset about this. Now that I've been away from SpaceX for 5 years, but while I was there, I even started a company. One of my other passions is energy, so I wanted to just build large solar farms out in the desert. So I started buying and selling vacant 20-acre lots in like a few of the desert zip codes in LA County. Got really good at it. Had like a team of like 6 virtual assistants doing all the paperwork. And then I'd hold on to the ones next to power lines and then basically sell the rest. So I got good at sales from this, but ultimately, from doing that for a while, and also in parallel, like, it didn't tell a soul about this at SpaceX either. I got a online master's degree in civil engineering, energy infrastructure. Um, I realized like this isn't hardcore engineering; it's commercial real estate. And so I sold all my land holdings, and pretty much the day I closed that company, got my founders together and started Turion Space. So, um, and with Turion, it was like what I realized with doing that was it has to be hardcore engineering and it has to be space if it's going to be enough to get me to walk away from SpaceX, because SpaceX, like, it really was the dream job. It is an engineer's engineer job. You work with the most hardcore engineers. You're working on the most interesting and difficult problems. And I get the sense, you guys probably do as well, that basically all of Elon's companies are like that. So that's really kind of the culture we're trying to build where we are building at Turion as well, is really an engineering driven organization, which I think is why you're seeing so many exciting companies come out of like spin out of ex SpaceXers, just because they're running with that mindset, and regardless of what they're doing, they're building engineering driven organizations. And the thing engineers hate more than anything is like being told what to do by someone who's not an engineer.
I'm actually very curious about this, like what this engineering culture means, and it sounds like you really enjoy your time at SpaceX, working with Elon. I've heard a lot of horror stories too. What's the difference between some of the horror stories coming out of people working with Elon versus and Elon's companies versus some of the people like you who who love the job, would probably stay there forever if you could. What do you think? Do you think other people are just not hardcore enough?
Yeah, they're not hardcore enough. Honestly, SpaceX was it was like the sickest place to work. But hardcore, I mean, like, yeah, my wife gets upset at me sometimes now when I'm traveling. And I'm like, you realize I would be traveling way more if I was still at SpaceX. They like forced me to go out to Boca Chica for like 3 months. So, I'm like, this is actually, counterintuitively better in many ways. But yeah, I think some people may get unlucky and they may get if you get a terrible manager, and they just, and you're a new engineer, like that could really stint your growth. And but the ones that, like, for me, any sort of conflicts on that I had on that, I really just cared about the mission so much. Like, getting to Mars ultimately is just such an exciting mission that, like, that always kept me going. And yeah, I mean, there's like the horror stories you'll hear, I think, some of them valid. I have plenty, but like ultimately, if you stay at SpaceX, if you're at SpaceX more than 3 years at least, then you've at least survived one cycle of like a local maxima and a local minima in terms of like, challenges that you faced. So after being there 9 years, the thick skin you get from going through probably 5, 6 of those cycles is like starting a company like Turion. And even, some of the low points we've had have not been enough to deter us from charging forward. And I don't think they ever will at this point. Um, so yeah, not hardcore enough. There's your answer. Sorry for the rant, Raj.
When you think about like engineering culture, and like, I guess one thing you said is report to engineers, which I get. Is there other elements of the culture that you're like have tried to like preserve at Turion? Is there like a specific practice that you do that like you think is like very unique to SpaceX that you've tried to copy?
That's a good question. There's not a ton that we've tried to just copy and paste, but I think the like keeping the organization as flat as possible is something that we are
So
are
what does that mean? I often people say that, but like, does it mean like one manager has 20 ICs or something? Like what is a flat organization?
yeah. So like removing layers of management so that between me and the base engineers we're as close as possible. We're about 120 people right now, and at most, there's three layers really. Your ICs, your engineering leads, department leads, and then the exec level. So the way I tell like my execs, if you're an exec and anyone VP or up is considered an exec, then the way you should be thinking is like you may have a specific focus area, but you should be operating like like everyone directly reports to you and no one directly reports to you. So effectively meaning that like it doesn't matter if so and so actually these departments actually report to you. If there is a problem in the company between those parts of the org and other parts of the org, like there are no barriers for you to address whatever that problem is.
Oh, so when you say everyone reports to you, it's not just under your org. In the whole company, everyone reports to that VP.
Not
At
necessarily,
least
but
that's the
like
mindset.
at the department lead level.
Okay.
So the department lead / like director level, we have about 12 of those, and we're going to keep expanding those. And the goal of like department leads is to rip out parts of their org and establish new departments. So we're probably going to do that again. Like the next update there is going to be elevating someone from a department lead to a VP level, and then we'll split their org into 3 different departments.
And all the VPs report to you?
Yeah. So between myself and Richmond for my COO. So I think the culture at Turion is unique because one of our early like significant investors, he runs a forward deployed venture capital, great firm for all you like pre-seed, seed stage hard tech companies out there, with a focus on national security. He was the first forward deployed engineer at Palantir. So he connected us, with a guy named
With
Richmond,
his
who's our
firm is
COO now.
called Forward Deployed Venture Capital.
Yeah, Forward Deployed Venture Capital.
Oh,
Awesome
that's a
fund.
great name.
Yeah. So, uh, Rich, what he brings from to the culture is a lot of interesting elements from Palantir as well. So like it's an interesting mesh between because Palantir they had a really interesting culture. If you don't know too much about that, like maybe get Mark on the phone next time or one of the OG Palantir, like one of the first handful of Palantir guys, and they'll tell you how unique it is. So, so yeah, we have a relatively flat organization with a lot of departments. And the other thing is like being very engineering decision making driven, and giving department leads leads the ability to really operate the company. Like the way I see it is there should never be a department lead that comes to me or Rich or anyone else with any other executive with a problem with another org. They should be working across the different department leads in order to solve those problems. Really, I see the department leads as like they're the ones really operating the company. So yeah, and I think that is starting to really sink in. We've been very systematic in establishing that framework, and like when it comes to performance reviews, if you're director level, like it doesn't matter how well your team did or your department did. All you're graded on is the same things I grade myself on and the other execs, the company's bottom line relative to what the target goals we set out in the beginning of the year. So, so you are incentivized to also, uh, operate without boundaries across the company. So, so yeah, I think it's, like I said, like a lot of people that have come from other companies that weren't engineering led decision making companies, like that is one of the things that they really appreciate and keeps them here. Is the fact that like, you know, my co-founders and I are like working with folks on the ground floor on like on random problems like at any given moment. One of the things about SpaceX, one question I get a lot though about why did you leave SpaceX? Depending on the day, like I could have 20 different answers, all valid, and none of them related to like it was too hard, But I think what I realized is like building a Mars colony, that it's an important mission, but it's really just a thing to do. What you really need to do to accelerate mankind's galactic destiny and go to the other stars, right? If that's the ultimate objective, is like building a Mars colony is just a thing to do. You need an economic forcing function to justify its existence in the first place. If you're going out and advancing space technology, you need something that is like a financial reason, something that is making you so much money that it justifies continuously advancing and accelerating space technology forward. And our bet on that is platinum group metal and precious metal asteroids. Or those materials in asteroids. They're abundant in asteroids on many. They're more abundant than all of, worldwide reserves. In fact, NASA released a paper on a metallic asteroid in 2021 where they got some measurements off of it that's, estimated to be $11.7 trillion in platinum group metals, more than all worldwide reserves. So, of course, that would affect market commodity prices of those materials, but it gives you a sense that like the value out there is very real. And the argument also that a lot of people bring up that's very valid is, well, if you go mine more platinum group metals right now, worldwide annually is about 400 tons, refined PGMs annually. If you go and start bringing back a 1,000 tons, a year, and market prices just crash significantly, then isn't that going to destroy your business? Not necessarily. I think actually the better framework to look at it is that's the objective, is to get market prices to come down. If you're the one leading that effort, you're still going to be making a killing, But look at aluminum back in before, like aluminum refining had and processing had some breakthroughs. It was like the kings and queens of Western Europe were wearing aluminum jewelry because it was so rare, and now it has changed the face of, all of aerospace and really just industrial society generally.
One thing I was going to say about the talent issue, for the culture stuff, is I noticed there was a big difference between people working in hardware, like hardware engineers, and people who are working in software. Like, there's a big cultural shift just in the market of talent. I feel like software engineers in general feel more entitled because of the huge amount of jobs that are out there for software. And hardware engineers are way more hungry and way more motivated because there's much fewer opportunities for hardware and mechanical and robotics. Like, if you're a lot of people want to study those things. A lot of people care about those things. People like Ryan who are inspired by space, but the amount of jobs that were out there for those people up until recently was almost nothing, right? Like, you have to go work at some plant, basically, at GE, and who wants to do that, right? Like, that's such a significantly worse opportunity than working at Turion, right? So I noticed that the pool of people that you were able to attract, A, was higher caliber than software and less entitled, and B, less entitled. So, they were so motivated. Do you notice that, Ryan? Is that something that you've seen as
Oh,
well?
most definitely. If you're, the people that come to work here, they're working here because, again, it's like that's another similar thing I would say about our culture is being very mission driven out like decades, the way I honestly see it is like, if we the end like what is the end game? It's galactic destiny achieved, and not just multiplanetary, but multistellar, and that's going to take a long time, right? This ain't a short game, and it's even with asteroid mining, like that's at least it's going to take 15 years before we're really making a dent in the company's bottom line for that, actually sending material back. So but the way I see it is, look, Charlie Munger, he was like 99 and still at the helm. And these days, like, you got Brian Johnson, telling us how to live forever. So I'm like, all right, I could probably keep it going.
Achieve your galactic destiny when you're 200 years old.
Yeah, I was like, all right, I don't know. I'm not maybe quite as optimistic on some of the like lifetime lengths as them, but optimistically, call it baseline, like 150 should be achievable. So, that gives me another 120 years. So we got time.
One thing I'm always impressed by is the ability for hard tech companies with these really long timelines to just raise money along the way. So I was just looking at my notes for when I invested in you guys, and one thing you had, which I thought was impressive, was you had a $246 million LOI signed. So tell me a little bit about how important those kind of when you're pitching this dream, especially when you're early on, how important is those kind of commercial terms? Yeah, I mean, how do you even get an LOI when you're pitching them something that's 5-6 years away?
In our past, raising money was it wasn't it didn't come naturally or very easy for us. I think it's that's definitely changing, and mainly because I'll be honest, on LOIs, I didn't actually see them as that tangible either. The only thing I see as tangible is contracts and revenue. And in, last year we, closed a Series A of 15 million, and it's also exceeded 10 million in revenue. I don't know if that's a trackable ratio, but we're going to exceed that this year by a similar ratio from the amount of capital we raised this year. So, I think at this point that was a useful thing to do in order to get that first chunk of capital raised so that we could really get going. But I don't see it as that tangible. But I mean, for different companies, it's also different. That's just also was the mindset I've really always operated under. So one of the ways we lucked out is Space Force. Right after we graduated YC, Space Force put out their first early stage company program called Orbital Prime, which is a small business innovative research, SBIR program where Department of Air Force actually awards contracts for the exact things we're talking about doing. So that came out like in the fall after summer 2021, and we walked away from that with 4 contracts. And those have now spun into, multi-double-digit million-dollar contracts with the Space Force. So it is important really early on. But I think like after that first chunk of capital, I think the numbers are, matter the most.
Yeah, revenue is obviously better, but if you're seed or pre-seed stage company, like it's hard to have revenue in these kind of hard tech things. I think it's impressive because it showed that often you get people that are like very into the science and engineering of it, but can't do like the business side of it. And I think it showed that like, hey, this person could like hustle and get some stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, like for example, I guess like if you're a fusion company, you have to figure out something to show demand and interest, right? So yeah, there are definitely scenarios where it does make sense, but fundamentally, when we started Turion, we started it not because we're seeing other companies, I won't name names, but other space companies raising $1 billion at the time, like, oh, we should start a space company then. It was really like out of spite of seeing that. Like, you don't need $1 billion. Like raising $1 billion and you're not doing the thing yet, like that just seemed crazy to me. Like we should probably we can raise $10 million and we could actually do something real, And so starting not at asteroid mining and not even necessarily debris removal, but starting even lower behind that, that's really kind of how we got things going. So yeah, and like what we're doing at Turion now is there's kind of 2 parts. There's really a fully integrated infrastructure, which consists of the hardware component, our droid satellites. We call our satellites droids. And then a software component, which is Starfire, the Starfire platform. So Starfire, you can use that to task our existing fleet. We have 2 satellites in orbit already, both operational. And basically right now what those satellites are doing is call it on the commercial side, we can help companies resolve anomalies. If they can't communicate with their satellite, we can image it when we fly by at 35,000 miles an hour. And not just a dot in the frame of a picture, but like a resolved image. And that is interesting because now if you can't communicate with your satellite, is it because the antenna didn't deploy? Is it because your solar panels didn't deploy? Did you get hit by something else? That's something that we're doing right now. Or on the national security side, call it intelligence with discretion.
We need to wrap in a second. Raj, do you have any final questions?
I just have one question for you, Immad, actually, which was like, you've done a lot of, cool space investing. Like, what has been your thesis on the space right? Like over time, and are you still doing a lot of space investing? Like, kind of interested.
I did a bunch around, I guess like 2018, 2022 time period. I've seen less recently. So I think there was a lot of interesting and excitement there, and a lot of these ideas were failed. I kind of think of it as like there's kind of 3 buckets when you're doing a space investment. Number one, like, does this person know what they're talking about? Right? Like, obviously with Ryan, with the SpaceX experience, I mean, some of the best people are from SpaceX, but, there's also Blue Origin and now like newer companies where Relativity have enough like maturity that there's some talent coming out of them. So yeah, do they know what they're talking about? That's step one. Number 2, like how interesting is the idea and how like potentially commercial is it and how quickly you can do that. And I've done some things that are like probably just going to take a really long time, but like I have a company who's doing like H3 mining on the moon, which I'm like, okay, I don't know what the intermediate steps for that are, but that company's still doing well. Actually one thing I like about Turion is there was like obvious like step, like it was already a commercial thing. I think things where you can launch something within a few years and it can be commercial straight away. Like we did this interview with Albedo and they're doing like imaging. Imaging is already a huge commercial opportunity. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is like, how, like honestly, how good is the pitch, right? Because like weird thing about space companies is they need to be really good at selling it, like selling to customers, selling to the government, selling to investors. And often like these are engineering type people like Ryan that like don't have this business sense. So you kind of like need enough business sense that you can like actually get to the end there. But these spaces are also huge, right? Like a software company to get to like 10 million in revenue, like Ryan's doing last year, like that takes a lot of software, right? But like, you can, if you can crack some stuff and get unlock like government spending or some commercial use cases, there's a lot of money here that people are spending. And then obviously, lastly, there's this kind of long-term trend where SpaceX has made it cheap enough to get to space, which is like kind of
Well, I wish
created
that
this
were
industry.
true, Immad. I probably shouldn't talk smack on it, but I would say more than making it low cost, what they have done is they have made it
reliable.
easily accessible. I could go on their website with a credit card and buy a launch. One of the things too that I think is has ended up being an interesting part of our culture is just like sci-fi. Like that, sci-fi is our culture. If people ask me about it, and I've read a ton. I read a ton of sci-fi, and I ask everyone at the last interview stage what their favorite sci-fi is. So if it's not a good sci-fi and they respond with it, well,
what's your top non-obvious sci-fi book recommendation? Maybe we can end on that.
It's hard for me to pick a single one, but like here's one that I think is a really fast read. You pick it up and is not one most people have heard of. When you when people say Isaac Asimov, it's almost always Foundation. If people have read a lot of Asimov, it might be like the Robot series. But Asimov's best, without a doubt, is the book End of Eternity. So go out there and read End of Eternity. Besides that, though, I would say the book Hyperion is honestly one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, Hyperion's great. Have you read? This is not a sci-fi book, but have you read Case for Space?
Yeah.
Case for Space is such a fun book. Actually, like also partly got me into like investing in it. It like lays out like a bunch of things you can do in space, like from like obvious to like crazy. But I mean, it's not a fiction book, but it's almost fiction in the like it tries to think of like the most extreme things you could do in space. It's a really fun book.
Yeah, I know. Delian was on your guys' podcast too, and like to be honest, the two things that could be the economic forcing functions that really allow us to continue expanding outward, I think is like the Varda angle, like making things that cost a lot of money on Earth or are impossible to manufacture on Earth, like pharmaceuticals or Z-bland fiber or whatever. That I think is another really interesting angle that that some folks are exploring.
Yeah, Varda just raised another 200 million, I believe. I just saw a tweet earlier. All right, we're gonna wrap. Really good to have you on the pod, Ryan.
All right, guys.
Glad we can finally make this work. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please leave us a review on whatever channel you're listening on. Makes a big difference to the algorithm and to the success of the show. And see you all next week.